Hey guys, let me know how the audio sounds. Let me know if it needs to, the music needs to be a bit louder or a bit quieter, and I'll mess around with it. How's everybody doing? Adjust that so I can see it. Alrighty. Okay. Um, so today I'm just going to be showing off, for those of you guys that are wondering what I'm doing, I'm just going to be trying to fix an issue I was having with one of the plugins that I use, showed off in one of my videos pretty recently. Probably a lot of you guys actually saw it, called vim-dotoo. And I'm basically just going to be showing off the plugin and trying to fix some errors with it. Now, time to find what I'm missing. I was just about to finally get out of bed. It's a pretty lazy day for me. How's it going today? I guess, well, pretty chill if you're getting to lay around all day. Hey, how's it going, Don Pedro? Don Pedro? What are you guys up to today? How's it going? Let's see here. I have to remember how I actually did this. Okay, agenda views. I remember now what I needed to do. Make that a bit bigger so you guys can kind of see it a bit better. Starting to seriously become hungry. I'm pretty jealous. Well, I guess I probably could have laid around all day, but figured I should probably actually go ahead and do a live stream, because I did say I'd do more of these and I didn't actually do any. Haven't really released many videos this week just because I was working on that org mode related video for most of the week. I was kind of a bit busy trying to take full advantage of my break I'm on for school, so hung out with my girlfriend and went to the mountains, went skating, which is pretty neat. Yeah, actually really quickly I'm just gonna shout this out on some other discords, and just in case anyone else is interested. Don't go reading all that stuff. I'll move this over here so I'm not outing myself just in case. And that's probably good. All right. And then at noon I fell asleep again. I feel like we've all had like those kinds of days where we just are super unproductive. All right. Let's get into this. So, Huh. Interesting. Oops, that's awkward. I meant to put get. Tell us how your journey with Linux started. Yeah, it's pretty simple. For the most part, I originally, let's think of just like where I want to start this. Probably the best way to start this is like, because I didn't start with Linux until I was like in university, and I'm just gonna turn down the music a bit actually. There. So I didn't get started with Linux really until I was in university. Originally, I kind of got into it mostly from kind of like, because originally I was in computer engineering. I said this pretty recently in the Discord actually, but originally I was in computer engineering, and I was kind of interested in the programming side of it a bit more than I was in the actual electrical engineering side of it. And so I started getting more interested in just switching over to software engineering, which is what I'm in now. And one of the big things that got me into it was the fact that I started like looking into embedded systems. If you guys know what embedded systems are, and embedded systems are basically like stuff like your watch would be an example of something that uses an embedded system. So very low level stuff. But a lot of things I saw was that the actual trend for the market for jobs were starting to go towards like embedded Linux jobs. And so I started being really interested in that because I liked the programming, but I still enjoyed the electrical engineering portion of it. And so I started kind of looking at doing things related to embedded Linux, which, like I was saying before, became pretty popular. I figured I'd look into what people do to learn embedded Linux, and one of the biggest things that people suggested was looking into actually using Linux. And so that's kind of where I originally started looking at Linux. And then one of the things that kept making me consider switching to it was at the time I originally I was using a Surface Pro, like those Microsoft computers. They're super nice. And I kind of was considering, I kind of was like getting frustrated with trying to open up programs like my file manager and waiting like forever for my file manager to actually open up, and everything like that. Like, I don't know if you guys have used, if you guys use Windows or have used Windows recently, like I'm sure you've probably like, no matter how much it feels like you strip out of your system, you're still having to deal with all the like slowness that comes with just using Windows. Like, no matter what, you can get an SSD and everything, but just some programs are just going to be slow. Some of them just have, let's just set this up a bit more. Some of them just have like way too much legacy for them, and they're just going to be slow no matter what. And so that's kind of one of the things that made me starting to look at alternatives. And one of the big alternatives would be Mac OS, obviously, because it's pretty much the biggest alternative to Windows. But the biggest thing was that I didn't want a Mac. Like, I realized that after having a Surface, touchscreens are great, and I wanted something that would allow me to use a touchscreen. And I didn't really trust Apple's opinions on a lot of things. I didn't like how they did a lot of their work, because they're super anti-consumer, anti-developer, all that sort of stuff. So then I ended up just going straight towards Linux, trying it out on just a virtual machine on my Surface. I loved it, and then I put Linux on my Surface, which if you guys do have a Surface can be a bit of a hassle, but biggest advice that I can give you is do not buy a Surface for Linux at this point in time. There's like custom kernels to make it work, but at the current moment it is not perfect. So make sure that you do your research before you go buying a Surface thinking it'll work well with Linux, because there's a lot of weird things, like the webcam uses some proprietary PCI based system. So anyways, that's just that sort of stuff. But anyways, that's kind of how I got started with Linux. Philosophy for you, or matter of productivity. It's not really a philosophy thing too much. Like at this point, I've kind of started to get into like the philosophy. I'm not really I do care about open source because I think open source is great. And like really personally, if I can use an open source software to get my work done, then I will. Like pretty much always. I don't really think there's anything else left besides like Zoom, because I can't replace Zoom for school. But outside of that, I pretty much just use like anything open source that I can instead. When it comes to like the lifestyle part of it, one of the biggest things that I love about it is the productivity you get at the command line. Like that is something that, like, I don't know, even when I was on Windows, I've tried using the command line for a lot of work, but it's not really as smooth as you'd hope it would be. And after like switching to Linux and trying it out for a bit, and I didn't mention this before, but I originally started with Linux with I originally started using the WSL before I started running it in a virtual machine. So that's just a bit of context. So for those of you guys, there's a lot of people out there that say WSL hurts Linux, but at least for me, it was like one of the biggest things that got me to actually switch to Linux, because once I tried it through WSL, I was sold. I realized how great the command line was. I realized how much you can do with it, how productive you can be. And like I come from an electrical engineering background at this point. Like I didn't have any software related history really. Well, I had like obviously done computer programming courses, but I didn't have like an insane history in programming. So that's kind of what got me into that. And for the matter of productivity, it's kind of the same sort of thing. Like I really like working with the command line. I guess you could say the Unix philosophy is where the philosophy part would fit in, but there are some things that like plain text just isn't enough for. Like sometimes images are totally necessary, and sometimes drawing them with plain text is a huge hassle. Like, I don't know, I'm sure you guys can probably think of a few examples where it's just better to write things down by hand, just to get a general gist of things. Like that's how I like to build out the structure for my programs, is I like to actually take a blank page, basically write out and draw and connect a bunch of dots, see how they would connect, and then kind of get a general structure for how my program is going to work. And then after that, I actually begin programming. Anyways, so let's see what else. Buy a Dell XPS or Lenovo ThinkPad for Linux. Yeah, honestly, I like now that I'm running, because right now I'm running a ThinkPad, and I can pretty much like say with confidence that I would probably just stick with a ThinkPad at this point, because I have had no bad experiences. I use like the special ThinkPad kernel modules. For those of you guys that use ThinkPads, you might want to look into that. They're pretty great. I like use it for stuff like I can like limit my, so like up here I have my battery, and it will like hold my battery percentage between like 70% and 80, which is good because then it prevents your battery from like trying to overcharge, and then it will extend its battery life, and it prevents it from getting too low on power, where you will actually like shorten the battery life long term. So like right now, actually let's see how my battery life is holding up right now at this moment. So right now my capacity is like 101% of its original expected lifespan. So that's pretty good. Like most people, especially on my older laptops, it was around like 80% usually. Gotta mute my phone. All right, sorry about that. That was a bit of an interruption. Anyways, let's continue looking through some of the stuff. Feel free to let me know if you guys have any ideas for videos while we're doing this. I like to try and take notes on new video ideas as we go through. My most recent video was actually inspired by one of these live streams because there was just a lot of interest in how I do my note taking and why I used org mode. So I figured I would make a video because it seemed like a lot of people are interested, and the video's done pretty good, at least for my channel. Okay. Wait, you want touchscreens and switch to Linux? Is it a thing? Is it a thing in the Linux world? I assume you're like asking, are touchscreens a thing in the Linux world? Yeah, totally. Like right now, my laptop actually doesn't have a touchscreen. Partly because I use one of these guys, a little ThinkPad pen. So right now I'm basically just moving around a stylus on a little tablet, which is pretty sweet. That does exist for Mac OS, but I kind of prefer a system where I don't have to worry about Apple killing it off. But there are lots of touchscreens that work alongside Linux. My previous laptop that I was talking about before had a touchscreen, so that's pretty nice. Chromebooks can also do Linux. Its integration. Yeah, Chromebooks are like built on top of Linux, and I think you can do like some weird ways to access some of the Linux underpinnings, which is pretty cool. I've never had a Chromebook personally, but if you're looking for something cheap, maybe that's a good option. Biggest thing is that even though right now there's a lot of like hype around getting ARM things, you're still going to run into issues with a lot of Linux distributions not supporting ARM if you guys get some of the ARM-based Chromebooks. Faster for very popular Linux YouTuber. Approaches very moral philosophy. Okay, do I watch Luke Smith? Yeah, I haven't watched many of Luke Smith's most recent videos, mostly just because I haven't been super interested in a lot of the content that they've been, and they've all been like pretty, I know, hot take, but a lot of them have just been like derivative stuff. Like one of his most recent videos, which is great. I'm really happy that his recent video mentioned Groff, because that got like a pretty big boost in popularity for my channel. Considering that a lot of my content is related to Groff and Troff, it's always nice to have a bit of publicity because that subject is very small, very niche, not a lot of people interested in it. So, so that's always nice. But yeah, so I don't know. I have like okay feelings towards him. And his content. Yeah, his content's good. I originally actually saw Luke Smith's video back when he released the one about screencasting on FFmpeg. I don't know if you guys know that one. That was like the first video from Luke Smith that I saw. And so I'll be honest, like he's actually like given me a lot of really cool content or information out of it. And a lot of his videos have been really interesting. So I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with a lot of his content. It's all been pretty interesting. I also have a GPD Win Max and touchscreen. It works perfectly, though I don't use it very much personally. Yeah, totally. I was really interested in getting a GPD Win Max, but I personally needed a bit of a laptop upgrade because at the time I was still running an ThinkPad X200, and if you guys are in the Discord, like I mentioned before, I've like mentioned how brutal that can kind of be using such an old laptop for that sort of stuff. But yeah. All right, that seems like that's all we got for questions at the moment. Like, why would you do this? Yeah, X230. Yeah, an X230 seems like a pretty decent middle ground. Like my X200, I'm not gonna lie, like running a laptop that doesn't even have like OpenGL support is brutal. Like there are so many programs that just didn't work on it, like at all. Which is part of the reason I could only start live streaming recently, is because I didn't run OBS, and trying to live stream through FMmpeg, which I tried on Twitch a couple times. I just ran into way too many bottlenecks, and trying to work around it was just such a hassle. But at least with this, I don't really have to worry about it. I have so much better performance options. So that's kind of a lifesaver. Okay, let's try and convert this. Gavin, any advice for someone trying to learn programming? Love the idea of open source. Interested in finding programs that work for money. No degree. Advice for starting to learn programming. I guess the biggest advice I have is just honestly, I feel like I'm especially bad about promoting this. So I feel like it's important that I actually mention this. And I feel like maybe I try not to do videos on my opinion, because honestly, I don't I care about other people's opinion, but I'd rather have them just chat about it rather than see a video of them just saying the same sort of stuff to me, if you get what I mean. But for my opinion, if you're just getting started with learning to program and you want to work yourself towards a degree, look in your area, look on Indeed, see what people are hiring for, see if it's a language. If you don't know any programming languages, this is what I'm assuming, then look into what people are hiring for. If it's a common language upon most of them, then learn that language, learn to work with it, learn the basics, learn algorithms, learn general networking, learn all that sort of stuff. Practice with a few APIs that are pretty big. And honestly, you can probably get started with programming pretty easily from that. That's probably the best advice that I have when it comes to working for money. And I think open source is great, but honestly, a lot of things are at this current point, there's not a lot of open source companies that you can work for, and making things open source, it can be really hard to get started making money. So I totally get where you're coming from. But if you're just looking at getting hired by somebody, that's probably the best advice I could give you is pick a language, learn it, and learn all of it, all the things that you need to, learning how to work with APIs, learning how to work with algorithms, all that sort of stuff. And then when you want to learn another language, you can apply that sort of knowledge to the other stuff. It's a lot better than getting yourself stuck into the trappings of just trying to learn, this new language that's really big. I see it all the time. I've seen people that say, I started programming this year, but I know 3 different languages. Well, chances are you probably don't know that language very well. And yeah, so it's just I don't know. You guys see where I'm coming from though. I think it's better to learn one language, learn as much as you can about how to use it in different ways. And then if you need to learn another language, go for that. Anyways. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, Racket is really cool, but it is honestly closer to a what's it called, to a research-based language. So it's not very common to work with. It's not very common that people want to work with something like Racket or Lisp in industry. So I wouldn't really recommend starting there if you are just starting to learn about programming. Part of the big thing that I talk about on this channel is mostly just things that are small that I think deserve a bit more recognition. Whether or not they'll help you get a job is somewhat questionable in some cases. Sometimes they won't really look too good on a resume. So I'd recommend that if you're looking to get started, maybe look at a bunch of different languages. I personally got started with C, but I'm not really saying that C is a great option for your area. Look around, see what there is. I've got cute computers, relatively modern, 2016. Yeah, man. Old computers can honestly be pretty surprising in how powerful they can be. Like I was saying before, I was using an X200 and I was recording pretty much all my videos with that. Obviously, there were some limitations that came from the fact that it just had an unsupported version of OpenGL. And it was over a decade old at that point. So I'm not really that surprised that it was running into performance issues. You can find decent work with open source skills, frameworks. Yeah, like that's kind of the big thing that you get from open source is the fact that you like learn the tools. Like the tools are usually what are so big in open source. There's usually not going to be something like Apple's not just going to be replaced by some open source company, because honestly, open source doesn't work very well for stuff that's design based. It's mostly, that's why the big reason that like Apache is so popular. Apache is just an example. There's Nginx. There's a lot of other options out there that are open source that act as like HTTP web servers, or different frameworks will be completely open source, that sort of stuff. So that's kind of where open source really gets its hold for the most part. And there's actually like some, like obviously you're not looking to start a company because that would be quite a big leap, but there's actually some really interesting content out there in starting an open source company that I've actually looked into. I don't think I would be starting a company myself personally. I think I'd probably maybe wait a bit if I was planning to do something like that. Yeah, Python is pretty in demand. It depends on where you are, really. Like some places Python can be in demand. Where I am, I haven't really seen many Python jobs. But a lot of the jobs in my area are like Java based or C# based, which both are languages that I'm not really like super into, but I'm like, you know, it is what it is. I see. Yeah, I know. Not the most clear question. I don't. Okay, I see what you mean. You want it to come from your open source path. Then there you go. That's one of the best things, is that learning stuff like how to use the command line can go a long way. And honestly, just learning to work with like a lot of languages are like completely open source. Like some languages like are more open than others. Like Golang is a good example of one that's really popular, that's very open. Like you can see the standard and everything without any cost, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Like I don't think JavaScript is like the perfect language to get started with, but yeah. Sorry. JavaScript is like a pretty commonly used language. Like whether or not some people don't like it, I'm not sold on it, but JavaScript is a good way to get started. It's super in demand. You can use it for literally everything, especially if you're just getting started. Especially if you don't have a degree, getting started as a web dev is definitely the quickest way to getting jobs. Like I have a friend who like even has no software background, decided to learn how to do web dev, and now he's doing that. All right, on the topic of languages, what has to happen to a man for him to commit? What has to happen to a man to commit Vim script? I don't know, man. You got to be pretty crazy if you really get into Vim script. But honestly, it's a pretty, I know it gets a lot of hate, and like the biggest issue with the language is that it really does not handle state very well. Like you really have to put in a lot of work to avoid state, and since you're working with a text editor, there's pretty much always going to be state no matter what you do. Do you edit your videos with FFmpeg? I did at the start, and you can tell because my first video is super long and not very well edited, and you can definitely see it. Also, what language do you like to see in the industry more? What language would I like to see in the industry more? Honestly, I feel like it'd be like interesting to see Lisps used more in industry, but I also definitely see why they're not used as much in industry. And as much as like, I know I'm gonna get hate for this, and I know nobody will say it in the comments, but I'm sure there's people out there that are gonna go crazy for this. But Lisp is very frustrating to work with other people. I'm gonna be honest. Emacs language is Lisp based, right? Yep. eLisp is what it's called. It's most similar to something like Common Lisp. So Racket's pretty different. Racket's more of a scheme. You can think of Common Lisp as like a bigger language, and then Scheme is as minimal as it can get. There's very small structures to Racket and Scheme. So yeah. Anyways, this is a problem. Okay. Interesting. I see. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, if you want to get started with Emacs, that's a great way to start. I think honestly, yeah, if you're just starting to get started with programming, I think learning, honestly, like JavaScript is a pretty alright place to start. There's lots of resources. I wouldn't really say it's like I think it depends on how you look at it. I think long term, it's better to start learning to program from a lower language than JavaScript because, and I know I'm not saying that this is a fact. I've just seen that this is a pretty common thing, is that at least when I've worked with people in projects and stuff like that, that if they come from a background where they've started with a higher level language, then they can be a lot harder to work with if you have to do any lower level stuff. That being said, whether you'll end up working with that sort of stuff, it's hard to really say. But yeah, if you want to get started, and also like the nicest thing about on the topic of using open source knowledge to actually help yourself with getting actually getting paid and getting money, starting off with web dev is a great way to use it because there's a lot of open source tools for web dev. Don't go anywhere. All right, well, I'll probably still be here unless you're taking the longest shower I've ever heard of. Okay, and then I need to go to oh, you guys probably want to see screen key, don't you? There we go. All right. So now I've got screen key set up. There we go. All right. I feel like I get, I see the appeal of a lot of those languages, but at least coming from like sorry, I'm responding to the Martin's comment about replace C with C++, but something like Zig and Jaya or Jaya. I don't really actually know what Jaya is, so let me just double check before I make a statement that I'll regret later. But honestly, I personally, like at least coming from an embedded systems level, I feel like knowing C goes a long way because it's pretty much like the best option for those sort of systems. Since it can get pretty close to compiler, like you can kind of estimate what you're going to get with a compiler when you compile the code, but not really what you'd get. I'm trying to think of how to describe this. You can go low enough to go under an operating system very easily with C, but not so much with a lot of other languages. And the biggest thing with them is that a lot of them try to use stuff like garbage collection, which is not what you want in embedded systems. And I'm not saying that this is always true. There's a lot of times where that wouldn't really be necessary. Oh yeah, Jaya is that game development language. Jaya programming language. I think one thing that does take away from C, that I also wanted to mention actually now that we're talking about it, Jai. Okay, Jai. I assume you're saying Jai. But the big thing that holds back C, in my opinion, is the lack of like actually built-in threading. So having to use, I don't know if you guys have ever worked with POSIX threads. Don't worry, I'm going to try not to go like too in depth with this, but like the POSIX threading system is like honestly light years behind like what you get with something like Golang, which has threading built in and honestly a much more simple threading system. You're not doing as much message passing and stuff like that you would get with something like C using POSIX threads. So that's kind of something that holds back C, but there's been a lot of a lot of big pushes to use different threading mechanisms outside of POSIX threads. Um, but yeah, so personally, I think like I myself am a huge fan of C, and that's just because it's the language I started with and have worked with a lot. And I'm a really big fan of like operating systems levels courses and stuff like that. So I might be really biased in that way, but I think learning languages like Zig and Jai might be good for the industry, but whether or not they're like perfect, I don't really know. I think a lot of times people use C for times that I think would have just been easier to do in Go. I'm not really like always into Rust, but I definitely see a use case for it. So I'm not just gonna hate on Rust blindly, like it seems like a lot of people love to do. But I think Rust definitely has its place, and it definitely has its pros and its cons. But yeah, so I don't know why I'm yawning so much. Excuse me. Yeah, that's kind of my general opinion on the topic. I think C is super powerful and it's great, but I think it deserves to be used more appropriately. Like I was saying before, sometimes people use C when it really would have been better off using something like Go, where they really didn't need to worry about the garbage collection issue. And they like the biggest thing is that you want your code to be maintainable. You don't want to write something that's so complex that it's hard to read. And I think that's one of the biggest things that holds back Lisp-based languages, like I mentioned before, is the fact that trying to program with something like that can be a bit of a hassle. If you're in a big group, because just like sometimes it's not that easy to read. That being said, I'm far from an expert on the subject. That's just been my experience. I have not worked at any place that has actually been hiring me for a Lisp-based role. So there's that. Yeah, that's the big thing with C, is that since it's a low-level language, it can be really, I don't know, it can be hard to use in industry, and it can be hard to show off your skills, versus something like JavaScript or Python. There's tons of libraries out there, so you can make something that looks really impressive, but you kind of just used a huge library that somebody else wrote. There's some stuff like that for C, but it's a lot more common for those sort of languages, especially if you're using like Node. Like the Node community. So Node is just a way to run JavaScript on your desktop, basically, as you would most other languages. And so the Node community is like really into the idea of what I was just describing, where there's just like tons of plugins that do a bunch, or not plugins, there's tons of libraries that do a bunch of work, and you're just basically using those all the time to get all your work done, instead of actually programming something from the ground up yourself. But yeah. Is it really worth working through a book in C? Jumping into a web. I think honestly, I don't know. It's kind of hard to really say. I think like the best middle ground that you'll see nowadays, it's kind of hard to really say because like my background took a lot longer to get to than I feel like if you wanted to just like get started without a degree. If you wanted to get started without a degree, I don't think learning C from the start is really that worth it. And there is advantages of learning stuff like TypeScript. Like TypeScript gives you the typing that you get from C, and I think learning from a strongly typed language is good. So something like TypeScript is a good place to start, but just starting with TypeScript, I don't really know if there's a lot of people out there that really do that. I don't really know if there's any resources on that, but it'd be kind of interesting to see how that goes for people if they just started with TypeScript. If you don't use it, you lose it, lol. Yeah, like luckily a lot of languages like relate to each other. So like especially C-like languages, like JavaScript is somewhat of a C-like language. It's kind of a weird mix mash of things, like it's got mixes of Perl, C, Scheme. Let's see, what else is there? That's pretty much it. So it's got like a big weird mishmash, which can be kind of frustrating to work with. But I think if you're just trying to get started, it might just be good to go with the JavaScript route, as much as I hate to say it, unless you're looking to go long term. That's kind of how I'd look at it. If you want to go start to finish, like starting learning to getting a job, probably learning something like JavaScript, or maybe even learning something like, if you wanted to do something phone-based, maybe learning something like Flutter. I think Flutter's gotten pretty popular recently as a way to, I haven't worked with Flutter personally, so I can't really speak on the topic, but Flutter apparently is very similar to JavaScript using Dart. But yeah. Yeah, there is some definitely annoying undefined behavior, especially like I personally, I've like gotten pretty comfortable working with things like pointers, but I understand that pointers scare away a lot of people, and I definitely get why. Been a lot of like, I know some people will be like, oh no, the push isn't because pointers are frustrating, it's just because of all these other reasons. But I feel like that's a big thing, is that a lot of people just don't want to work with pointers because pointers are scary and pointers can be pretty brutal. Especially working with strings in C is also something that I think really should have been done better. I think the idea behind it is really simple, just an array of chars, but honestly the built-in functions like sprintf and stuff like that really should have been better implemented. And so because of that, now we have stuff like sprint, sn, is that what it is? Oh man. Oh yeah, SN printf, that's what I was looking for. Here's what I was looking at. So I was looking at SN printf. Like, this should be better than it actually is. Like, you'd expect it to be able to handle errors a lot better, but it really doesn't. Yeah, printers are easier than borrowers and lifetimes. Yeah, there's a lot of like ways people have tried to do stuff to avoid the experience that you'd get with pointers. But honestly, the simplicity kind of has its advantages. It just can be a little complex to work through and understand all the time. But once you see something that you're not used to, looking it up usually helps you get started in fixing your issue. I think once I can actually get working, I can definitely go deep dive into the lower level topics. Yeah, I definitely think that's the better option. I think starting at a higher level stuff and honestly just doing side projects on the smaller level stuff might be the better option. Hi, do you know how to install Zero through Windows subsystem for Linux? Yeah, I guess. I'm not really too sure how how WSL handles GUIs right now, which is what Zathura would be. But if you're going into, like, I'm not running Windows right now, but at least based on what I've had before when I was using WSL, you would just basically open up Windows, go into Ubuntu or whatever operating system you are running in WSL, and then just install it. And then I think you might have to do X11 forwarding, which there's a way to do. I think there's actually a video on how somebody else does it, where you basically are able to you would look gorgeous in a suit. Thanks, man. Or thanks. I guess I don't really know if that's a male name or a female name. I also have no idea how to read that. Actually, if you want to give me a way of how to read that, that'd be interesting, because I've always wondered like how you read some of these symbols, but I am not a multi-language guy. But yeah, so that's how you do it. You'd have to use X11 forwarding as far as my understanding goes, but I am no expert on what WSL is like at this current moment. X-Men. I'm not too sure what the X11 forwarding like program is for Windows is now. Here, let me just double check. X-Men. Well, at least that's the first result. X-ing X11 on Windows. That sounds right. Let's see here what we're dealing with. Vladimir Bikovic. Huh. Hopefully Vladimir Bikovic. That's a pretty sick name. Okay, cool. Yeah, anyways, sorry. Let's just look through this really quick and see what we're dealing with. Yeah, so you'd probably want to use something like Xming, at least based on what I literally just looked at. I'm no pro though, but hopefully that helps you out. Let me know if there's anything else I can help you guys out with. Okay. Anyways, back to what I was doing before. Don't worry, I don't expect to be very productive while I'm doing this like Vim scripting sort of stuff. I'm generally just trying to give you guys something to look at in between when I have something to talk about. So don't be afraid to ask questions or anything like that. So what's your workout routine? Right now, like gyms are closed where I live, which is kind of a shame. But I used to do, if you guys are in the Discord, I've actually talked about it. But yeah, most of my like history in like sport and the reason that I like at least look like mildly athletic is because I used to do like sprint canoeing, which is a really weird sport. Let's actually I'll just show you guys like a picture of it because it gives you more context. So this is the sort of thing that I used to do. Pretty weird sport, not super common, but that's just the sort of thing that I used to do. I was never very good in a lot of like, I don't know. I was just like never very good at like any individual thing, and it worked out pretty well for me. But yeah. So a lot of my like working out is from like running and just lifting weights in the winter usually. But right now, obviously I can't lift weights because all the gyms are closed. Looks interesting. Yeah, that's pretty fair. It's a pretty strange one. Yeah, I've talked about it a bit in the Discord, but yeah. Explain those shoulders though. Yeah. Yeah, it's like pretty hard on the shoulders. You kind of got to build them up. I have like some pretty messed up shoulders. Mine are like, yeah, really, really weird. Like this one over here is like completely, like my shoulder is like detached from my collarbone. But luckily it like happened when I was young enough that it just like sits there and it doesn't mess me up too much. Why not switch to sway? Well, the biggest reason to not switch to sway for me is that I've tried i3, and I like the idea behind it. I just personally don't care for the actual way that you do tiling in i3, and sway is based off of i3, so that's pretty much the reason. And also I'm not really like super sold on Wayland, mostly because a lot of programs that I run use X11. And sadly, you don't get hardware acceleration for anything that runs under X11 in Wayland. Hopefully that answers your questions. I'm sure you know about Tmux. You choose to not use it. I use Tmux sometimes. I don't really use it that often. Mostly just because like a lot of times I have like a web browser open. So I just use a tiling window manager, but it's not like you have to use one exclusively. Like when I'm SSH'd into a server, I use Tmux. And here's pretty much like, I'll show you guys this is my general setup. So like it doesn't really look any different from my normal setup, but I can do, I can like do splits and everything, and I can jump back and forth, all that sort of stuff. So I don't really do anything too crazy though with my Tmux setup for the most part. And then I even have like my own status bar that I can like alternate on and off. But I don't really use Tmux very often unless I'm SSH'd in somewhere. And that's pretty much why. Like that's the only reason. There's not really anything other than that. But yeah, so like for example, if I had Tmux open, and I wanted to have something next to it, I'd have to still open another window anyways. So then if I use another window like this, I still get a decent amount of screen space, but I still get this available. Servers and try. Yeah, I've like looked at DVTM. It seems all right. I never really cared for it though. I don't really use multiplexing to begin with, and I often like have to use like stuff like JavaScript based documentation for some programs and APIs I'm working with. So there's that. Do you use Vim or NeoVim? Recently I've been giving NeoVim a try, but really I use Vim more often, especially just because my university servers require me to use Vim. But yeah, I could probably install NeoVim on every single university server if I was dedicated enough, but I'm sure they'd get pretty upset with me if I was doing that. I try to make my setup pretty compatible with both of them. But because of that, you'll see stuff like if has patch 7.4.7 and stuff like that in my config. And there's lots of stuff like all these like has nvim and stuff like that to basically just check and see what it has available. But yeah, I hope that gives you a pretty good answer to your question. But yeah, for the most part, my config is compatible with both. At least last time I checked. Actually, let's find out right now. Let's see what it's gonna. Yeah, so pretty much the exact same thing. Yeah, I don't have GUI colors enabled, so my colors are a bit different, but it's pretty much the same sort of thing. And it functions the exact same way. I get the same sort of completement. But yeah. Vim or VS Code, which is best? Or it depends. Like if you're just starting out programming, I think you should avoid like the annoyances of starting with Vim. But personally, like Vim's pretty hard to compete with. I've like tried to use the Vim plugins for VS Code, which like I personally have used VS Code like a few times and I've really liked it. But the Vim functionality just leaves too much desired for me. And honestly, like as much as I like some of the features that it has, I can get by with what I have in the terminal. And honestly, I use the terminal for so much that it's kind of hard to really beat. What country are you from? I am from Canada. I use NeoVim. There, I don't have any config though. Yeah, I usually don't even install my configs, which is kind of funny to think that I still try to keep them compatible with Vim. But sometimes I install them on a university server if I'm needing to do something like very specific. Like for example, like for some database related stuff, it's kind of nice to just run Vim from in there and work from there, but it's not a must. Sorry, I don't know why I'm so yawny today. Should have gotten better sleep. I do not speak like any French, sadly. Even though like some of my family is from like Quebec, which is the part of Canada that speaks French, or like not from Quebec, but has spent most of their life in Quebec. So, yeah, I really should know some more French, but I sadly do not. Anyways, let's close this before anyone else asks what this is. Should have slept like me. How's it going, Devim? Oh man, Devim. How's it going, man? Have you used Plan 9 from Bell Labs? I've used the original Plan 9, like just in a virtual machine, nothing on hardware. I have a feeling it probably wouldn't run on my hardware though. But I have tried 9 Front. I used it for like a very short period of time. But but I realized that it wasn't the sort of thing that I would run on my main desktop. I'm probably going to make more content related to it. Probably a bit more related to, okay, there we go. Debbie Mendes, I guess. Yeah, I was kind of like, I thought it was going to be like David at first, but then I was like, there's no D, I don't know where the end of this name is. Also, sorry to anybody if I mispronounce your name. I like feel like sometimes it seems like I'm like borderline illiterate. But yeah, I'll probably do some more content related to Plan 9, especially 9 front. I've got some really interesting things that I'm looking at 9 front, but I want to just make sure that I'm covering everything properly. I don't want to misinform people is the big thing. But yeah, so look forward to more Plan 9 content. Actually, considering that one of my videos has like done pretty well, I did a video on my setup for basically taking notes with Vim, and it's actually done pretty well. So yeah, so that's pretty good. So I'll probably do more content related to Vim. Probably not that much. Like I don't really want to just become a person that's just reviewing plugins or anything like that, but or just yet another person saying Vim can save you hours if you do this. So yeah. Which programming language do you use? I use a few. Probably the most common one that I've worked with is C for the most part, and Java. But honestly, I don't really like using Java, but I'm kind of forced to do it because of university. That's because I'm Brazilian. Nice. Okay, that explains the name. I actually have like a few friends at university, which sadly I'm not at right now, who are Brazilian as well. They have some pretty interesting names that you don't usually see. Oh man, I have no idea about the Python Fortran for numerical simulation one. I don't know what how Numba actually does this. Let's see. Let's look into it. Oh. How's it going, Soham? So that's how I think that's how you pronounce it. Soham. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. I feel like I'm just mispronouncing everybody. Just a random hello. Hello back to you. Do you get triggered by being called American? No, I've kind of accepted it now. I kind of just assume people assume I'm from America, which is kind of funny. I've actually had like people, call me American on some things, but I don't really care. It's not really a big deal. Us Canadians are very used to it. DWM patches, your build looks simple. Yeah, here, let's show off my DWM. Okay, so let's see here. So I have like a few personal ones that I used. So I called it focused. I call this focus adjacent tab, but that's not really what it does, but it just allows me to jump left and right. I think that's using someone else's patch that exists out there. Move focus is basically just a way to like jump back and forth between windows using super H and L. And then if I just have no external monitor, then it will just move to different workspaces, which is pretty simple. Maximize is what I use to basically do this. It's pretty simple. It's nothing too crazy for the most part. MV is basically just a way for me to move windows around like this. It's super simple. Oh yeah, and then I also use move adjacent tag is to move like windows back and forth between monitors. So like just kind of doing this sort of a thing. I find that's pretty nice. These sort of patches are just kind of what I use to take full advantage of my what's it called? My multi-monitor setup. And then if I don't have another monitor, then it just passes it to the adjacent workspace, or tag, I guess you could call it. Matches bills. Just a random hello. Python compiler, right? Python compiler. Oh yeah, we were looking at this. Oh yeah, Numa Python compiler. Huh. I'm willing to bet that Fortran's going to be faster than Numa is going to be. I have no... Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I feel like Fortran can be faster. Whether it will be faster, who knows? That kind of comes down to the programmer, really. I just saw on your GitHub that you have your own vim fork. Okay. Just so you have your own dmenu fork, rough procedure for keeping up to date. So, let's give you guys a really quick example. So, right now, actually, yeah, it's not gonna have it all here, but usually the way that I do it is I have my master branch right here, and then I have a separate branch that I call upstream, and that would just be based off of, I have it, I should probably move it over because I haven't cloned it, but anyways, I'd have a separate branch called upstream that I pull from, and then I just git merge into master if I need to. And that's the same sort of thing with if I apply a patch, I just do git branch, and then whatever the name of the patch would be, and then I apply the patch. If I need to do custom stuff, I do, and then I merge that back into master. Hope that makes sense. It's kind of time consuming. It's not really the worst thing ever. I usually just don't update if I don't feel like it. If I have some time to update and I feel like it, then I'll go ahead and do it. Luckily, like, it's pretty stable. You could probably use a version of DWM from, or dmenu from, like, probably, I don't know, probably like 2 years ago, and it'd probably be pretty similar to what it's like now. So you're not really missing out on much if you don't upgrade right away. I'm fairly new to Linux and all that. So it comes with it. Yeah, no, it's all good to be new to Linux. Yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions and everything. What's your OS? Right now, so I was thinking of just looking into, like, finding out whether something like Manjaro is actually more stable, because you always hear people say Manjaro is more stable than DWM. I mean, not DWM. Manjaro is more stable than Arch. So right now I'm trying out Manjaro just to try and see where this statement is coming from. Since I never really had issues with stability on Arch, personally, so that was just kind of my experience. But I figured I would give Manjaro a try just to see if the whole, like, delayed packages and everything actually made a difference, which so far it hasn't. If anything, it's just been more frustrating because all the programs that I've wanted to be able to just install all of a sudden are no longer there. But yeah, so that's kind of, or not install. All the programs I've wanted to upgrade are not currently available, and I've had more issues with Arch or with the AUR. So personally, at the current moment, it's seeming like Arch was more stable all along the Manjaro, which isn't really that big of a shock. But I figured I would try it out and just see where people were getting this statement from. That being said, I still think that Manjaro gets more hate than it really deserves. It seems like a pretty viable distro. It has that really nice ncurses-based installer that it has for the Architect Edition, which is pretty neat. If you guys have ever looked at that, it's not really anything too crazy, but it's all right. Nice. Fits in a multimeter setup. Is that Arch? Yeah, no, so that's kind of what I was saying before, is that I'm just trying out Manjaro. I usually run Arch, though. I'm not really very familiar with a lot of the Python ecosystem when it comes to like compilers and stuff like that. Uh, hmm. Well, supposedly, at least according to this, that NumPy can approach the speed of C and Fortran, but I doubt it'll be faster. Um, yeah, I don't know how they differ personally, and looking over this, it's kind of hard to really tell. Okay. Any books you'd recommend for getting into Unix or programming? What's it called? The Unix programming environment is a really big, simple one that you can find online. Let's see here. That's a really quick. So that book I just posted down in the chat. You guys can go ahead and take a look at that, and that should basically cover a lot of information on how to get started with Unix and programming. Really, it starts out. It shows you some information on C, all that sort of stuff. Gives you a really good rundown on how Unix works. As far as like relating Unix to Linux, there's a lot of resources out there. For the most part, you don't really need to read a whole book just to get started. If you want to get into networking, there's a lot of books related to that, but I don't really know any that come to mind right away. Try Gentoo. I like the idea of Gentoo, but I just don't really feel like putting in the time to set it up. Why do some people dislike systemd? Oh man, the systemd topic, the topic that seems to just never go away. Most of it, like I kind of get where it comes from. Systemd is like super complex. Doesn't really need to be as complex as it does. It has binary logs. So for example, you can't like put logs through awk and stuff like that. You have to use external tools. But that's probably the best example of it. That's probably the biggest reason that people don't like it. Systemd is heavy and slow and does not respect the philosophy of Unix. Yeah, I'd say that's probably the best example of it. I feel like a lot more people say that it's slow than it really is. Like personally, I haven't found that. I found that it does have issues with stuff like shutdown times can get really long with systemd. I've never seen that with anything else except for systemd based distros. NGL I ran Manjaro for a while. It broke horribly on me more than once on 2 machines. Maybe that's because I used complicated bloated KDE version. Yeah, I used their Ncurses installer, and honestly, I just pretty much didn't install any base system, so I installed everything myself. So I'm basically running nearly identical to what I'd have on Arch, just with, I don't know, probably whatever Manjaro sneaks in there. Also, I just used like their default partitioning, which isn't usually what I'd use, but I don't really care. I used to care about partitioning, but now, honestly, I just put it all on one drive, make one big root. I don't really care. It's not really that big of a deal for me, personally. Thanks, no problem. Can't actually remember. Oh, wait. Ebooks for, yeah. There you go. So that's a pretty good book that you should take a look at. I think it's a nice, like, I think it's like kind of a fun book to get started with because it has lots of examples of everything. And I find it like a really fun book to read personally. All right. Looks like we're all good for, oh, wait. Booting with systemd takes 10 seconds, and OpenStart RC it only takes 5. Yeah, I've seen startup can be slow sometimes. I don't know about OpenRC. I've heard like run it can be really quick, but I I've only used run it for a very short period of time. when I try to avoid, but I never really got into void personally. It's not really like, I don't know, it sounds really cool and I totally think it's neat for those that like it, but it's not really my kind of jam. Anyways, got a few more people checking this out now. Wonder what changed. For all of y'all that just showed up, feel free to throw down in the chat what made you suddenly show up. I'm really interested to find out what caused that. All right, so I think I have a pretty good idea of how I would like to go about doing that. For those of you guys that are wondering what I'm actually doing with this, I'm basically trying to work on this issue that I filed for vim-dotoo. For those of you guys that watched my recent video, if you haven't, go ahead and feel free to go check it out after the live stream or whenever. Okay, it's a pretty good example. Do any of you guys work on any personal programming projects? Figure I might as well ask while we're here. Cool. Thanks for pointing that out, Camel Trader. It's a fun name. What was I going to do? Huh. Interesting. Also, who was here last time when? Oh, I know you're trying to. Redux OS. Oh, that sounds familiar. Let's see here. Is it Unix like operating system? Oh yes, I have heard of this. I haven't actually like looked into it. Is it? What's its state? Let's find out. Includes optional GUI orbital. Custom libc written in Rust. MIT license? Oh, that's pretty interesting. New releases. Let's check this out. This seems pretty interesting. 0.6. 2 weeks ago. It seems pretty active. I don't know, it seems interesting. I like the idea of something starting from the ground up. Oh man, created 4 years ago. So that's relatively new, at least for an operating system, but I guess considering that they're doing all their own work, I guess it sounds pretty reasonable. Based on Ion. Oh, this kind of okay. Thought I meant like parallel in a different way. All right. Oh, geez, chat's been going off for a bit. Do you use ligature fonts? No, I do not. I just use plain old normal fonts. None of these. For the most part, if I wanted to do something like for the most part, yeah, I don't really have much use for ligatures really. I like the idea of them, I guess, but I don't really care for them personally. I'd rather just have something show me exactly what I have written down. And then if I don't want it written down, I'd use something like concealing. Uni metatask. Oh, it's pretty cool, Atomic Toaster. I haven't really worked with Haskell very much. I've been interested in looking at it a few times, but it's not really my kind of like syntax. That being said, I feel like just like more exposure always solves the issue for someone like that. I have note-taking programming project. Why isn't double right-clicking a thing? Thanks for covering recutils. BTW, I use it every day now. Recutils is great. I really like the program. I think it deserves more love than it really gets. And in fact, actually, after I made that video, I can't really say it's me. But pretty soon after, the dev decided to give it a lot more attention, which is great. So that project's been doing really good. I've been looking into covering it again in the future because that video did pretty well for my channel, actually. So Rocket from scratch. That's sick. Probably have to learn Rust for the that final. Yeah, so big and complex. Yeah, it's pretty fair. I don't know. I haven't had to learn Rust. I haven't had anything in school that's related to Rust. I know a few classes at my university use Go, but I don't really think any of ours use Rust. Most of my Rust experience has just been quickly looking into it, trying it out a bit. But I never really got super far into it, so I really am not an expert on it. Oh man, I don't know. I haven't really used LightDM very much. Let me see here. So problem is that there is. I would try. So since you're using Arch, I think LightDM uses a service. Systemctl, and then just check and see that it's actually enabled. Is probably the best example of what you'd probably want to do, I guess. And then just check and see if LightDM's service is enabled. I don't use LightDM personally, so I can't speak specifically on it, but that's probably what my first guess would be. What's your thought on the future standard of C, C2X? Huh, I haven't actually seen this. That's really interesting. What are my, let's find out what they're changing. Sorry if I'm quiet for a minute. I'm just going to read through this. This actually seems pretty interesting. Oh, that's pretty interesting. Oh, that's pretty interesting. To allow for variable length some interesting stuff in here. I'll probably have to dig into this after the fact because I don't want to just not talk for the rest of this, but I'm pretty interested in it. I don't know. Maybe I'll look into this a bit more. Maybe I'll chat in the Discord a bit about my feelings towards it after I've like looked into it a bit more. Because I don't want to just say anything surface level. Huh. I'll definitely try it out. It would be really interesting to give it a go. Yeah, I didn't actually even know that this sort of thing was coming on. That's really interesting. Yeah, NixOS is getting pretty big. Have I tried NixOS or GUIX? I've actually been pretty interested in GUIX just because it's Guile based, and I've actually looked into Guile a couple of times. I haven't personally used it very much, but as a scheme fan, I think it'd be pretty interesting to look at. Personally, I don't like using something too OS specific for my configs and everything, but who knows? Could be interesting. Do you do live programming? Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm not too sure. I've been thinking about doing it, but at this current moment, I'm like kind of hesitant. We'll see. Maybe I'll do some live programming in the future. I tend to not be very good at multitasking like that. Like talking while I'm programming isn't great. I can't really like think, if that makes much sense. I don't think the live stream would be very interesting for the most part. Maybe doing some live programming for something super simple. Maybe I'd do. Ah, Go style defer. That's interesting. That'd be really cool to see. I'd love to see that in something like C. I feel like that could go a long way. That being said, we don't really want to have C just turn into Go and have like that being said, like obviously Go has like garbage collection and has like a lot of different variations on C, but obviously we don't want to make it the exact same thing. No error handling style. Huh. E2X. Recursive internetwork architecture. Huh. Oh. Is it just like a networking thing? Nothing much, Brian. How's it going? How's it going, Easy? This stream is going to be a bit shorter than my last one, so I'll probably cut this one off at around like an hour and 40. But good to have you guys. Great to see you. How are y'all doing? Also, if any of you guys are interested in knowledge management or anything like that, feel free to check out Brian Jenks's channel. He has a lot of stuff on Obsidian, which is like a note-taking program. So if you guys have looked at my most recent video, I did a video on note-taking, but it definitely doesn't come close to what you can do with something like Obsidian. So feel free to check out his channel. Got some really good content. Okay. Org note taking. Where's all the org note taking? Right now I'm looking at this recursive engine network architecture. Actually, I was going to work on fixing the plugin that I use for my note taking because I wanted to improve it. As I mentioned in my most recent video, like right here, this sort of prompt is very different from what it normally looks like. Normally what you'd get, let me think here, you would have, you'd end up getting, so if you do to do, it would like give you all of this, but instead the prompt would be pretty different. Mike my words, Brian is going to go Emacs at some point. I could definitely see that. I feel like, especially the way that I feel like Brian seems to like love Obsidian. I feel like that's a pretty reasonable assumption. I could definitely see that route going on. It definitely seems to be like a notes alternative. I guess if you really didn't want to learn it. Oh, interesting. All the address spaces are private. Pretty interesting. Okay, anyways. I'm just trying to figure out a good way to change this and use Vim's confirm built-in function to replace it, which is kind of annoying because it honestly is pretty similar. So maybe I'll actually just make this. So let's just try confirm. And then prompt, and then accept. Oh, I see. And then accept would be the other ones. Trying to think of how you do multiple arguments in that. Oh, I guess you'd have prompt, and then I guess you would do. I think that's right? Now I'm like kind of questioning it because I can't really remember how you do. Let's see here. So we've got. What was I gonna do? This is what I was saying before. I'm not very good at live coding, but I figure I might as well try my best. Okay. Oh yeah. For those of you wondering what I'm doing, I'm looking at my actual configs. So here is like a bunch of like functions that I load. Most of these aren't really anything too crazy. Like I have my tags is just a function. Repeating resize, which is like Control W. I can resize just a bit easier. But that's pretty much that. I have a word processing mode that I have here. Some netrw settings that I don't really use very often anymore. Auto compile, which is what I use for my my actual trough files. Oh, this one's really cool. This one's like visual sorting. So if I did like and I wanted to just sort based on this row. Then it will actually sort based on that row. Pretty neat for when you guys need that. You don't always need it, but sometimes it's useful, especially if you're kind of working with like a really simple spreadsheet sort of setup. Yank match, that's pretty simple. What am I looking for again? There it is. Okay, so it is just 3 dots. Oh my goodness, that was a huge amount of time to be spending. Okay, and then I would just oh wait. Okay. I always kind of have to learn parts of Vim all over again every time I use it, which is kind of annoying. I'm obviously no T-Pope, that's for sure. There we go. This is what I was looking for. think that's what I want. So let's try this out. So let's just go. Oh. Yeah, sort viz. Yeah, it's super useful. It's in my vim config. I think I grabbed it. I can't really remember where I grabbed it from, honestly. I feel like I didn't write that myself personally, but I definitely made a few changes to it. You can also do sort. Another one that I was looking at before is doing like stuff like do and then dot star, and then that would match all of this, and then I can actually do yank match, and then now if I just paste, it will paste everything it matched, which is pretty convenient. I also just do ym does the same thing. So let's just go like, so if I did like func star or dot star, and then I did ym, it would yank matches, and then I could just paste them all right there. Pretty simple. I use that one actually a decent amount. Pretty useful. I also use a do-it-yourself like do. Oh. Yeah, so this right here, this is just like a super simple plugin to, or a super simple script that I use. I don't think that would work properly. I'm pretty sure if I understand properly. So if I did, you're trying to say that if I like filtered it, so if I just did, let's just go ahead and do this again. So let's try and sort this using what you were saying. So you're saying if you just did sort. Yeah, so instead of sorting it based on that, it's just sorting it based on the first column. So if I did this, then I would get the same effect. But if I did this, then it instead sorts based on that exact column I was working in. So hopefully that helps you guys understand the point of sort viz instead of just using sort. But yes, I could just use sort if all I wanted to do was sort based on the first row. But yeah, so pretty simple, pretty useful. I use that quite a bit. But yeah. Okay. Let's go ahead and just make new. Oh, actually, I didn't even need to do that. Whatever. Okay. And then let's call this test. And then I want prompt. And then dot dot dot. Right now I'm just trying to make sure that I actually understand how to handle the multiple sort of things. Sort viz block. Yeah, I just kind of made it like this just because it was shorter. Not really for any other reason. I probably could have made it longer, given it a different name. Or maybe I could map it to something, but right now I don't really use that sort of a way. But that's kind of my current setup. Okay, so now whoops. I was hitting shift instead of escape. Okay, let's go ahead and test this. So and then all right, and let's just see how this goes. So now if I do whoops. That was a bit silly. All right, so that's working exactly how I expected. I wonder what happens if I do. I guess that's not gonna. Okay, that makes sense. Cool. So I know what I'm looking for. Now All right. And then how to with like 600 lines of vim script. Oh, dude, you should see my mess of a config, man. It's not great. My entire configuration is like 810 lines. Like, that being said, pretty decent amount of it is comments, and formatted in a pretty semi-reasonable way. But yeah, I have tons of vim script in my actual config. But that's just kind of how I like things for the most part. If I want more control, and that's part of the reason that I use Vim. I like the minimal portions of it, and that's kind of why I don't use like cock, like I mentioned in my video. Even though a lot of people like to say, oh, your configuration's so big, like comparing the size of my configuration to the size of cock is kind of unreasonable, because cock is, it sounds hilarious to say cock is huge, but I think you guys get what I mean. Oh. But yeah, anyways, I have lots of like white space in here, comments. Anyways, you guys can always look at that in your free time if you feel like it. But yeah. And anyways, what are we gonna do? Okay, so we got our choices. We got to confirm choices. Then it returns it. So I would want to do cock. Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's everybody's favorite. It's a lot of people's favorite Vim plugin. Okay, now let's just think what this would end up being. So this would end up being that. So what ends up if I do? All right. So we got this, and then we're gonna do echo. Okay, so if I'm doing this right, this should echo 2, I'm believing. There you go. So we got 2. Okay, so this is actually pretty easy to just replace. Nice and simple. Confirm, and then all I want, turn char. Oh wait, but this is going to be giving us, okay. What is the future of the file hierarchy standard? Man, I don't really know. I kind of, I feel like most of the like hierarchy for files is pretty set in stone at this point. I don't think it's gonna be changing anytime soon. Oh dang, I finally broke mine up into multiple files. One day I'll do a big spring cleaning. Yeah, I feel for you. Yeah, man. I just can't, when this is just a response to like atomic toasters, like I just can't throw stuff out that I might need one day. I know what you mean. Like if I look at where is it? There you go. So I have like a whole folder for like old stuff that I'm just like, maybe I'll need this one day. And like this is like Vim old, which is like holds just like a bunch of old stuff that I might not need. And this is 926 lines of Vim script that I've been like, maybe I'll want this at some point in the future. Which is just like madness. Madness, I tell you. /config. I feel like a lot of things would break if we change that. User should be data. I could kind of see that. for etc and everything. I don't really know if I think user being changed to data makes much sense, but I kind of think most of that makes a lot more sense. I totally really want to try out Vim LSP to replace Coq. Gotten it where I want it. Yeah, it's totally fair. Coq is like pretty powerful. It's pretty hard to beat. I've literally tried every single LSP client that exists for Vim. I'm pretty sure there's probably some out there that's like super obscure that I've never heard of, but I've tried pretty much every single one that exists, and that's kind of how I ended up with the one that I'm on, just because it feels the closest to being native to Vim, but also working on both Vim and NeoVim. Once NeoVim's LSP becomes built into the core and it's fully released, I may consider trying it out, but I'm not really completely sold on it. Yeah, if every program put their configuration in .config, that would be really nice. But then again, systemd home is the thing. Yeah, exactly. I just kind of like everything that's old, I throw it in here, and then if I need it again, copy paste right back in. Like actually, there's some things in my old that is probably still used. Let's see here. I'm just gonna see if there's anything in here that I think is useful. Oh, this was like so silly. These remaps and stuff. Some of these in here that I'm like, oh, maybe I would need these. I will probably never use again because they're totally useless. Like here's one that I actually use is for like IC as a text object. So if I do CIC, then it changes inside the comment, or a DIC. So that one's super useful. I use that one actually quite a lot, and it works with like any syntax, which is really cool. This one you can find in my configs. I have a more fixed up version of it. To do's I don't use. Now I'm just like suddenly looking through all this. Async do was like what I used before I switched to do. Had some pandoc settings, SDF settings, C tags. There's not really anything here. Yeah, here's when I was using like Vim LSP. I didn't actually save my NeoVim configs, which I probably should have. My NeoVim LSP configs. Here's some of my old mu-complete configs. Anyways, I'm just kind of looking through old files at this point, so that's not super interesting for you guys. So let's go ahead and continue working on this patch. Oh, actually, I'll probably cut this off pretty soon. I just realized what time it is, so I'll probably cut this off any minute now. Do you know something? Oh dear, I have like no experience working with anything graphics related, like ray tracing. I've actually been interested in doing a graphics related class using stuff like OpenGL, but I haven't actually taken it, so I can't speak on the topic. I should probably, maybe I'll learn that in my free time if I have time. Well, free time. You always think that you have free time, but you never really end up with it, especially nowadays. Yeah, I feel like when it comes to the future of, I think if there was going to be a big change in the actual file system structure, like you guys are kind of talking about, I think like a big thing was we would get something like namespaces, like similar. I don't know if you guys, we were talking about Plan 9 before in the chat. I don't really know if you guys are familiar with it, but Plan 9 has its own sort of namespaces approach to it, and I think I could see something like that becoming pretty popular. All right. And then all right. That should be one. Oh, that was silly. Oh, using a list as a string. Ah. Hmm. Hmm. Oh. Hmm. Oh. Um. There's just a quick link to Go Linux. Okay, I think I'm gonna head out in like 3-ish minutes because I'm getting pretty hungry. And what? I'm trying to think of how I'm gonna do this. How do you do that? Oh, I forgot about how this works. Okay, so I'm gonna have to do. Does cock or your LSP setup create special files or require special? Um, kind of. I don't know. It's kind of hard to really cover all of it really quickly just before the end of the stream. But maybe I'll cover it in a future video. Yeah, I've used term debug before, like the GCC wrapper. Super useful. I actually considered doing a video on it because just no one's talked about it, and I kind of like feel like a lot of people just love to like make videos of plugins instead of showing off something that's built into Vim that no one uses, but should be trying. Built-in package manager. Yeah, I've used the built-in package manager before. I just find it easier to keep it using the plugin plug. But the built-in package manager is pretty nice, or plugin manager, I guess technically. Yeah, symlings are not great. I think there's kind of a reason that they're kind of discouraged in a lot of systems, especially because a lot of times programs also just don't handle symlinks well, which is not great. Anyways, guys, I'm gonna probably head out in about a minute, so feel free to throw in any questions or anything you have to say before I head out. Yeah, that's one reason that's what I was just thinking. Plan 9 doesn't support it. They use like what is it called? Binding? Is that what it is? I don't remember off the top of my head. Okay, I'm heading out in a few minutes. I mean, a few seconds. Last call. Can you cover namespaces in a video? Yeah, sure. Can't hurt. Thanks for streaming. Really did enjoy it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys had a good time. I'll try to come up with some more interesting stuff to cover in a future stream. This stream was a bit dull by the end, so I'm going to try and mix something up. Maybe I'll work on my live coding a bit more. All that sort of stuff. Anyways, guys, I'm going to go ahead and head out. Have a good one. Nice seeing you guys. Bye. Have a nice day.